Okay, I know Tess is unable to make it, and we might get Sheriff Brackett and Maggie McLaughlin, but we should get started. It's a couple minutes past the top of the hour. Um, this is the Finance Committee of the Maine Recovery Council. I'm Benjamin Mann. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Finance at the Maine Health and Human Services Department. I also serve as the Treasurer for the Recovery Council, and we'll go around and do introductions and then dive into our agenda, which is posted on the Maine Recovery Council website. But I'll go over to Pat.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pat Kimball. I'm the current chair of the Maine Recovery Council. Welcome.
The dynamic duo of Deb and Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Deb Poulin. I am the clinical director with the Office of Behavioral Health within the Department of Health and Human Services.
And I'm Paul Vinsel, addiction medicine physician at Spurwink and at the Family Medicine Residency at Central Maine Medical Center.
Great. Let's go over to Mary.
I'm Mary Coyne, and I'm the executive director of the Maine Recovery Council. Are you all getting feedback?
A little bit. It's better now. I bet you we could probably hear you. We could. Paul, do you want to try talking just to see if?
So what I'll do is when Mary's talking, I'll turn off my audio, but I'll also turn off my sound because that seems to be going into her microphone.
Sounds good. I thought we might be able to just use. You guys can, whatever you want to do is great. Brendan?
I'm Brendan O'Neill with the Attorney General's office.
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Fortier, coordinator for the Maine Recovery Council.
Katrina?
Katrina Bonish, and I'm with the Attorney General's office.
And Grayson?
Hi, my name's Grayson Havens, and I'm also with the Attorney General's office.
Great. So we will, thanks for that for everyone. We'll go over the current balance that we have and the new spreadsheet that I sent out. And then we'll go into some implementation topics, grant RFP, which I think Elizabeth will be covering, financial reporting template for grantees, and then some additional, a couple of one-off items. Are there any other agenda items at the top that folks wanted to add? Okay, I sent this to Katrina. If I could share my screen. I sent another spreadsheet just trying to summarize, and it's very simple, but trying to summarize the finances for the Maine Recovery Council, but I think this can be updated in pretty easily in my absence, and I think it provides what folks would like to see, but leave that all up to you. We haven't looked at this really before, but you can see I can make it a little bigger. But in terms of our current financial situation, you can see the columns are just months. It starts in July 2024. The first row is starting balance for the fund. The second line is ending balance. And then there's just the change in the monthly change. And then I tried to summarize major payments that went out and then also major deposits that came in. So you can see in July of 2024, the start of the state fiscal year, we started with $30.8 million in our account. We ended the month with 30.7, and that just was $124,000 in costs that we had there, and that just goes through this. The current funding summary I got from OAG is $35 million. As of April 30th, and that there was one major payment coming in, which went out, or one major payment that went out to Recovery Wellness. There was a settlement that came in at 694,000. The reason why our account balance went up more than what the settlement was is because it was about $200,000 in interest payments. I didn't itemize all the interest payments since those are monthly and fairly straightforward. But you can see I'll just highlight a few other things. You can see in January and February, there were fairly sizable reductions from our account balance of $900,000 in January and $1.3 million in February. That was mostly attributable to the syringe service provider contracts going out in January, and then you can see the contracts that went out and the payments that went out in February for those providers as well. This is more summary level data. We have access to the amounts of the payments, but I do a lot of work, obviously, at DHHS with finances and everything. I typically don't do them in public meetings, so I'm just trying to balance providing transparency behind the payments and our financial situation without disclosing too much information on a provider level. But I see there are a couple more people. So before I ask for any questions or comments or requests, Representative Stover, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Holly Stover. I am the legislative representative to the council, and I represent House District 48.
Thank you so much. I don't know how much you missed, if anything, but let me know if you want me to repeat anything. And Sheriff Brackett.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I'm Todd Brackett. I'm the sheriff in Lincoln County.
Great. So are there any questions that folks have about this? It's obviously pretty straightforward, I think, and pretty simple, but I'm happy to try to add anything here that folks might want to see or clarify anything.
Just one quick one, Ben. Do these fundings include the school accounts?
So these are all actuals. The school stuff would be represented in the budgets that we've looked at in the past.
Okay,
this is just sort of like our snapshot of actual cash that we have in the account and actual payments that went out. As we know, we haven't like set aside or made any payments or decisions around the school side of things. So that's not represented here because that's just more on the budget side as opposed to actual transactions that are and the actual cash that the council has available to it.
Thank you.
Paul?
And I know that a lot of our contracts have gone out in May. Of the $34 million at the start of April, do you know how much of that has been obligated towards grants?
I do not. That's a good question, and you nailed that right there. We have made more. We've pushed out more contracts that are not represented on here because we haven't made the payment yet associated with it, or we have, and it's in the first 2 weeks of May. We might have done that. I don't have that information, but I think we could follow up and send that information, or I don't know if Mary, or Elizabeth, of any other contracts that have gone out the door that is not represented since the recovery wellness payment that went out in April.
Yes, we did have contracts that went out for start dates and payment dates in May. That total, and Grayson, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that total is just shy of $6 million for the year one payments that went out. And that would just include the May payments. I don't believe we have the June payments calculated yet.
$6 million, that's great. I'm sad that I'm not going to be here to actually represent that on the financial reporting piece. That's by far the largest obligation and payments that we've made to date. Sheriff Brackett?
Ben, would it be possible to show the interest somewhere And I don't think it needs to be done monthly, like maybe twice a year, July 1st or January 1st or something like that. I mean, whatever you think. I think for me, it helps put things in perspective. It helps me kind of gauge. I have in the back of my mind how I'd like to gauge, or I'd like to see the council consider gauging its own expenses, right? And things like that, in relation to interest. Anyway, it would be helpful.
I don't have a good reason why I didn't. I'm happy to add those. I'll update the spreadsheet with that on a monthly basis and send that back around. Brendan?
Thanks, Ben. This may not fit into today's agenda, and it may not be fair as you're walking out the door, but let me just go back to the schools 3% set aside and just kind of raise the question of how that can be calculated. Because the MOU with the school district says 3% of the recovery fund shall be earmarked, for the school district's MOU. And I'm not sophisticated enough to sort of think through how to do this with, interest payments coming in, expenses going out, other contracts going out. So I'm not really sure to what I would apply the 3%, what number, and I guess I sort of think about that in terms of like how much does the Recovery Council have available to spend to make sure it doesn't eat into the school district's 3%, but I don't know how to start to calculate the 3%. My assumption would be it's 3% of the money that came in the door from the settlements, and then does the interest get included in that as part of the recovery fund and so on. So anyway, I just wanted to raise that issue again, may not fit into today's agenda.
That is great. I was actually, that's a good question. I think I paused because I was looking for my spreadsheet that I can bring up. So I actually hadn't considered, I think I had originally calculated that based off of the projected total revenue coming in from settlements, and then did 3% of that and just created an annual amount that we should be providing over the 18 years. I think that makes sense because I don't think it makes sense. I think that's a reasonable approach for consistency and certainty of money over time, as opposed to providing a lot more upfront and then a lot less in the out years, because we know the funding is a lot front loaded. I think just for continuity of programming, I think the schools would prefer that, I think, and I think it's within our discretion to make that decision. But that's just a recommendation from me, to sort of annualize the total amount of the total amount of revenue, and then coming up with an annualized amount. I can see if I can pull it up quickly here, but
and I can tell you that at least on our actuals, both on our estimated spreadsheet and our actuals spreadsheet, we have a slug for the school districts. On the actual spreadsheet, the calculation is that there's just over $2 million that sort of is attributable to that 3%, based on how we've set up our spreadsheet.
$2 million total over the 18 years.
So, that's come in. No, $2 million of what's come in over the 18 years. Give me 30 seconds.
I have 5.7
over the 18 years. Okay.
Yeah. I imagine that's pretty close. So if you
that's interesting. Our estimated spreadsheet has a total of 3.4 just under sort of 3.455 over the 18 years. So maybe we're not doing it right.
No, I think you are. Yeah, I get 3.5 is what it should be.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Liz and Melissa are starting to dig into how to do that grant process, and I want to make sure, like, I'm aware that I'm probably not the best person to tell them how much is available for that, at a given time for whenever the grant process is stood up. I just have my rough way of doing it here.
yeah, and I think if we started, yeah, so that 3%, just so people are following along, both here and at home, if anyone's watching, the $115 million or so would be 3% of that's about 3.5 million. And then if we started pushing that money out in year one, that would translate to $338,000 for the schools annually. We know we did not push that out we did not distribute anything in 2022 or 2023 or 2024. So really, we don't divide by the total number of years. We divide, if we assume we're going to start making that payment this year going forward, it's slightly higher. So it would be, so slightly less than that amount. So so I can follow up and try to send an email to you all on that. But just so we're moving things in the right direction, do folks have other thoughts on not pushing out the funding in a consistent way? Like, should we front load it to schools and then back it off when the funding, when the settlement dollars dry up in the out years?
My comment is just that it's very hard to back off. If you start strong and then have to back off, that becomes very difficult because people adjust to what they have.
Yeah.
The other question I have is, do we even know how to get this money to the schools?
So that would be the role of the subcommittee that Liz and all of a sudden escapes me. Melissa will be headed up. So they're the one that's going to do the deep dive into the MOU. They're the one that's going to get a committee together and do some work as to how we move through that. So that work will be done by that subcommittee, which will report back to the full council.
Yeah, so sorry, I was doing this spreadsheet stuff on the fly, but it's right around $245,000 a year, assuming this year going forward to 2038. If we want to make equal payments, it's about $246,000 a year based on 3% of the total amount of projected funding coming in from settlements. That does not include interest payments. I think I would have to look at the language of the settlement and what that requirement is based on. I think it might be ambiguous. So I think we could discuss that further in the future.
Ben, just a quick question. And I don't know if this has been considered. Maybe Pat's the better one to ask. Should we consider engaging some input from the education folks on how what their preference might be, even though that may not be, obviously the council would have to figure that out.
So it's in the MOU that a special education consultant needs to be part of this process. So we know that. So Liz and And Melissa will be exploring that. We have to do that. Plus, I imagine that serving on their subcommittee, like we did with prevention, they will pull in educational experts to be part of that subcommittee. So that subcommittee will not just be council members, that will be people involved already in the education and school systems in Maine.
So just to be clear, I think that makes sense to me. It may be helpful to us if we knew fairly early, once that process gets going, what those folks would prefer as far as payments spread over or front loaded, or maybe some hybrid, kind of like we've done. That's all I meant. So it might be informative to us as we decide as a council what's the best way to make sure that happens.
I will pass that on to Liz and Melissa and make sure they keep reporting back to all of us to let us know what the progress is and what's moving forward and what's not. So I will be happily pass that message on, Todd.
And I've reached out to representatives of the school districts a couple of times now, once at Liz and Melissa's request. So I know they are digging into it.
Good. So anything else about general finance and account balances, things like that? I will plan on including the interest payments on that spreadsheet. I will send that to Mary and Katrina and Grayson and Elizabeth. And I think it should be fairly straightforward to just keep that high level spreadsheet up to date. My suggestion would be to include it here in the finance committee and then just include it on a monthly basis for the council as well, as sort of the current snapshot of where we're at. Understanding, and I think it's not a budget, it is just sort of where we're at with our finances right now. The only other thing I had off the top here before we go into implementation topics, even though this is an implementation topic, is I don't know if I know we got some feedback from OAG about hiring a person that I think all agreed on. Is there any more discussion here? I think just to recap what we discussed at the council meeting, I think they foresaw some issues with another contracted position, and we know the legislature needs to approve all headcount. I think there is this in between. I think the state can and the council could establish a limited period position through a financial order that is a little more. We do lots of financial orders at the department, so we could try to establish a person at the OAG using council funding through a limited period position. But Mary, is there any more information there? Maybe Brendan on sort of conversations with the OAG?
I had one brief follow-up conversation regarding, that position, and they were going to look into it more. Based on our discussion, I don't think it would be feasible for us to implement that position anytime before September or October, based on current capacity within our staff and the OAGs.
Good. I think we should continue to push for it and work to get that. I think it will be a pretty key position going forward, but I can take that as a follow-up to send an email with my thoughts before like next week.
Great, thank you.
Let's go to the grant RFP. I will turn it over to Mary and Elizabeth on that.
Yeah, I'll share. I'll pull it up so everybody can see it. Can you all read that? So everybody know. I think everything in yellow, I think, is what we specifically want to try to do, but I did go into the bottom. I don't know, Mary, if you wanted to start anywhere in particular.
Yeah, I think that let's walk the committee through the RFP in its entirety. I know you all didn't have a ton of time to review this. This is an adapted version from the RFP that was shared at the full council meeting. So much of this will look familiar. A couple of things on this first page to call out. We discussed internally, and I don't think it's feasible for us to be able to actually contract with a vendor anytime again before late August or September. So I think having a deadline of July 31st would give the council plenty of time to review applications and make a decision. It will also give us time between now and the June council meeting to make any final changes that are requested by the committee or other members of the council. So I want to highlight that we've also been able to include Chastity's name, which is very exciting as the point of contact for this RFP. And so another reason to delay it is to make sure that Chastity is able to respond to questions when she's officially contracted as the new ED.
It seems strange, Mary. Just saying.
There was a note from Maggie at the last council meeting around the proposal submission requirements that those had not been included. We did include those later on, so I highlighted that just to make sure I brought that to your attention. I want to make a note of the dates that we've listed here. So the initial period of performance is based on, again, the potential start date of this new vendor and looking for their first contract to go through the end of calendar year 2026. That would allow them to provide oversight and support through most of this current grant cycle. As you all know, the grant cycle doesn't end really fully until the end of July 2027. But as you see, the renewal period number one would be able to extend their contract through then so that if all was going well, we could have them support us through the entirety of the grant cycle. And then the option to renew that contract for an additional 6 months if there are follow-up needs around reporting or anything that the council would need support.
There's 1 month lag.
Okay, a date.
Yeah, September is not included.
Great. Paula just mentioned September is not included in that renewal period, so that would start September 1, and we can adjust the dates. Thank you. We've reworked the scope of services to hopefully provide a bit more clarity on what we're looking for. The primary services I'll walk you all through. Again, this is primarily review, but we're looking for support with contract management, monitoring, and compliance. This first bullet really just walks through all of what I think we'll need in terms of that oversight and high-level support to make sure that all of our grantees are in compliance with policies and procedures that we establish, and also with state policies as those apply. Throughout also all of these deliverables, we've really focused the reporting for the vendor to be focused on the executive director. So they would report to the ED, and then the ED would report to the council and work as the liaison between the vendor and the council members. Great. Part B, we're looking at data collection tools.
Mary, do you want questions as we go or wait to the end?
Why don't I walk through this section and then we can talk about each of the services. Does that work?
Yep.
Great. Part B here, the data collection tools and services. Again, pretty straightforward, not much was changed in that. But I just wanted to make sure that we could have those services and activities called out separately, as that will be a critical part moving forward, especially as we look to our first reporting cycle, looking for a vendor to help us to establish kind of best practices and protocols with receiving those reports to ensure we're in compliance. Part C focuses on the grant report development and review services. So that includes the financial and performance reports. As we'll talk about in a bit, that's something that Elizabeth and I have already worked to establish, but we would certainly ask this vendor to provide, again, some guidance and support if any changes were needed and moving forward. And they would also play a large part in the review of those reports once they are received. I believe we spoke about this at our last finance committee meeting, that eventually we want to have a vendor and the MRC staff really providing primary oversight of the reporting. And then if there are any major issues or concerns, those would be brought to the council, but council members would not be involved in sort of the day-to-day management of those reports. Great. As part of this too, we've included a quarterly summary of the reports, and that way it's an easy way or an easier way for the council to be informed about how our grantees are doing and whether or not they're remaining in compliance with our contracts. We did include evaluation and analysis in this RFP. After some discussions internally and thinking about it a bit more, I do think we should extract these services and include them as a separate RFP. There is potential support that we may be offered from the Catherine Cutler Institute to help us with our evaluation, and that would be part of their current MOU with the Attorney General's office. I have to have further conversations with their team, but did want to mention that because we want to ensure our reporting and evaluation specifically is aligned with what the AG's office is doing and our subdivisions. As you all know, we have to eventually roll up all of our reporting into a dashboard. And so ensuring we have that alignment with what we're asking our grantees for on a quarterly basis will help us at, a base level. And then hopefully we can have similar evaluation services so that we can look at Maine's opioid settlement funds in their totality and not have them evaluated by different metrics. Great. Great. As we mentioned at the full council meeting, we would also look for a vendor to provide some support with technical assistance. I did change this to an average of 12 to 15 hours a month. It was at 5 to 7 hours a week, which I don't think is necessary. Elizabeth will be providing a lot of the TA support, but ensuring that we have that additional vendor capacity is something that I think we would be smart to include, and we can call on those services if needed, but it may not be something that's the primary focus of this vendor's work. And then just general project management support services, supporting really the MRC staff, the ED and coordinator, to ensure we're staying on track with both our internal and external deadlines. As we've been working with Barry Dunn, having that just general project management support has been a huge asset for us and something that we should certainly include in this RFP. Again, not as a primary service, but something that we may call on them to provide as needed. Is there any more in this section? Great. All right, I think Ben, if you have any questions or any other members of the committee have questions regarding the scope of services, I'm happy to answer questions now.
Great. And I think the scope of services is obviously the main discussion item, I think, right? Like this is what I just want to make sure this is what people should be paying attention to, because this is what the contractor or the vendor will be providing. I think it looks great. I think some instances there was, they were reporting to the executive director. In some instances it does say MRC and the executive director. We should probably just standardize that. I think it's probably fine to report straight to the executive director because the executive director is just carrying out the direction of the council. But I wanted to clarify that to make sure that I'm also fine with it saying executive director and the council, but I think it's probably just for consistency's sake, that's probably can clean that up a little bit. I think it's gonna be expensive, honestly. So I was just wanted to manage expectations around that. But I think if we think things could be optional or should be optional, we could say that in the RFP, and then they could come in with two different prices, what's required and what's optional on top of it. Just so that there's more flexibility. And I think if we have estimates for hours per month for each of the services, it might be valuable to include that as well, just so that there is some baseline and comparability between vendors, what the bids, so that some vendors could assume like the evaluation services will take 2 FTE, two positions permanently, and some might, assign 0.2 time, like a 10 hours a month to it. So I think not requiring it, but at least having vendors come in with a time estimate, or us providing a time estimate for each section would, I think, help in comparison across bids, and probably help to control costs. And we can always amend the contract if we're not getting enough services in one area and want them in another. And then the only other thing I didn't see, I think there should be, is there a requirement about system, like a grant system?
There's not. No, there is requirements around helping with the data collection systems and protocol that include a grant management software or system in that sense. This RFP, I wouldn't say does a great job of getting into that territory of helping support the development of our next grant, the reporting and steps for this current grant cycle with the option to support that, but it does not include the software, which I know we've discussed at points, and I do have a separate draft of an RFP that does include that if we want.
Yeah, I think just for the sake of clarity on this, I think I would spell out that this RFP does not just exactly kind of what you said, say that like we don't have grant software right now and you could bring your own, or we can run this off of a spreadsheet. I think that could be a major cost driver if they're thinking that they have to procure licenses for their team and everything for specific software, or hosting services for data and everything. I think spelling that out just so that we, or at least collect the information and can evaluate it, makes sense. That's all I had. I thought it looked great, but and we could use the capacity.
Certainly. Okay, thank you, Ben. So just to clarify, your recommendation is that we include the grant management software as a component of the RFP, that we would like them to outline if they can provide that service, but it would
I
not
would have
be.
them. Yeah, sorry, that we're not, there's no requirement in this RFP for it either way. I think we would just want them to describe how they're going to track and organize everything. And that might be through grant software that they already have. It could be offline in a spreadsheet. It could be through SharePoint, which, there's lots of different permutations of how they might do it. And there are probably significant cost differences between that. So I think just having them describe how they're proposing to do that would be good, without putting, I'm open to other opinions, but I don't think we should be imposing what they do, but we want to know how they're going to do it.
Okay, that sounds great. And based on the way the scope of services are drafted, I think that would be relatively easy to include and would align with the request that we have in the RFP.
Pat?
I like Ben's suggestion of changes, particularly around the grant software piece. I also just want to reiterate the importance of pulling that evaluation piece out, because I really think we need to explore, one, if the Kathleen Cutler is going to do it, help us with the evaluation. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. And I'm also, after doing some explanation, if Catherine Cutler is doing the cities and the municipalities and the AG's office, it looks odd for the council to have their own and not be included as a whole is to how these opiate dollars and the impact they have on our state. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Here's the council over in one pocket and the rest of it's over here. This way it's a unified evaluation. I'm sure it'll be separated out within that, but it just makes sense to me to pull that out. And from what I heard from some people I know, if we include that evaluation piece in there, the cost of this is really going to skyrocket. And to do both what you're asking in that RFP, if evaluation's in there, there's probably very few companies in Maine that will do it. You'll get mostly out-of-state big company bidders, which will blow us out of the water in money.
Pat, I want to piggyback off what you just mentioned because I think there's 2 points I want to mention. One, I do think the evaluation contract period will look different than the grant management services. So I do think pulling this out of the RFP would be wise on our end and again, allow us time to investigate further what resources and support may already be available to us. I also want to note that the Catherine Cutler Institute has started to develop their reporting templates and they were able to share that with myself and Pat. And so we've incorporated that into our reporting templates and I've requested a meeting with them to ensure that, again, we have alignment at this point in the process and don't have to make significant changes moving forward. So we are trying to work, in collaboration with them now. And I do think it would make sense for us to explore the further evaluation as a sole source potentially with them or as a competitive bid.
Other thoughts? Was there other pieces that you wanted to walk through, Mary? Brendan? You're on mute.
I just had a question about how the RFP will be publicized, because that with other contracting opportunities, I think they just sort of went out through the council's email listserv, and I wonder whether that will reach the same target audience. And I don't think I'm not an expert about this, but I'm not sure that the council can use the state's RFP website. So I just wonder if you all might consider that issue.
I think maybe we just asked on the hiring side and got a no on the hiring side. I don't know if we asked about the procurement. I'm imagining staffs would say no to that as well. I can also take as a follow-up, I can ask my team. I could probably come up with at least 5 vendors that I think would be interested in bidding, and we can email them the posting directly, at which I feel fine about doing. There's no advantage to doing that, but if folks would be supportive of that, I'm happy to do that. Once it gets posted, we send it out to some vendors that might be interested in doing this. And I think we've already, I think we have a handful that we know that might bid already, right? In addition to our existing support.
And we can put it up on the council's website, but again, not sure if, who's going to be, who the audience is that regularly looks at that.
Would it be possible, this is just a suggestion, to add it to Maine Association of Nonprofits or Maine Philanthropies websites that I think some of those organizations that you mentioned probably do see on a regular basis? There may be a fee to post on either of their websites, but
It'll be
something
minimal though, Holly.
What's up?
It'll be minimal. I think those are good suggestions.
And Maine Philanthropy has their big conference coming up, which also, if there were resource tables, putting an announcement there.
Any other thoughts on scope of services in the RFP? Mary, anything else you wanted to just highlight on the RFP?
Those were the big things on my end. Elizabeth, would you mind just doing a sanity check for me and making sure there isn't any other major discussion topics that we've noted?
Yeah,
Or if you have anything that you want to raise?
I don't think so. I don't know if we wanted any input on those scoring rubrics. I think that was like the only thing we kind of added since we all met, but I think that was like the only big change.
Yeah, we developed a scoring rubric, per the request of the council, which is outlined with up to 50 points that can be assigned to each application. And much like we did with the grant scoring, we sectioned out, what 0 through 5 means for a score, what 6 through 10 means, and all of that. And we've also outlined the number of evaluators who will be part of that. And we have noted it will be an evaluation team, which will consist of members of the council, but will not be limited to council members.
Great. So if folks have additional feedback for the RFP, do you want that by a certain date, Mary and Elizabeth?
Yeah, any additional feedback by the 28th would be appreciated. Again, our goal at this point is to make sure we can publish the RFP shortly after the June council meeting. So by next Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays, I guess from now, the 28th, if there's any feedback, especially regarding sections we haven't discussed, that would be appreciated. And as a reminder, please send any feedback directly to Elizabeth and I, and not to other council members.
Great. Thanks for that. I'm excited. The RFP looks great overall, I think, and I think this is a very good direction to go in, and it will provide a lot more capacity going forward. And we're on the precipice of doing that. We have somehow just 10 minutes left, but Sheriff Brackett?
Do you have time for a semi-related question? I don't want to take away from the agenda, Ben.
I think we really only have, yes, go for it.
I was just curious, not to put Representative Stover on the fence here, but I know that I was surprised to hear about. I don't know why I was surprised, but I was surprised to hear about LD 1775, which was I think a bill that came out of the County Commissioners Association seeking some funding, about 43.5 million of which would in the bill proposal, I think would have come from the opioid settlement funds, which and I know it was an AFA earlier this week. I'm just curious if it was a non-starter or where it went, or if you even know, Holly. I'm assuming the council was aware of the bill.
That was on the county jail funding, the $87 million bond.
Yeah, it was a capital thing, I think, something that the commissioners came up with. I didn't know anything about it until.
It's a bond. It was a bond. We haven't,
bond one, yeah.
we had the hearing and we haven't done anything with any of the bond requests yet in AFA. But we'll be getting there. There were lots of questions, lots and lots of questions, but good questions. But we've had multiple bond requests and hearings. So there will be a work session at some point. Hasn't gone anywhere yet.
All right, cool. For what it's worth, the sheriffs met yesterday, and I think we're certainly in support of the concept of somehow fixing the jails, repairing the jails, right? But we're not in support of seeking opiate funds to do that. And we'll make that very clear.
Understood.
I'm not sure. I ran into Brendan in the hallways. I'm not sure, there's probably some challenges with it anyway, but I was just curious.
It was, it's a good concept. 87 million is a big price tag, even with the bond.
Thanks for that. Pat?
I just want to make sure I get to say before you end this meeting, Ben, how much you have done for the council I know,
Don't
I
do
know.
that yet.
You don't like that.
We have agenda items left. Let's
Just-
spend 5 minutes on financial reporting template for grantees. I'll turn it over to Mary again.
Great. Elizabeth is going to pull that up and we can walk through that together. This is a draft still, and this was developed after reviewing other opioid settlement reporting templates through discussions with other settlement administrators, and also after just reviewing Catherine Cutler's reporting templates and what the subdivisions will be using as their templates moving forward. What we're looking at here is basically just an overview of what information we're going to request from grantees during the quarterly reporting periods. I do want to mention that we will likely change the format in which we actually collect this data. That's not something that I'm going to determine now, given that I won't be involved in that process. So that's something that Chastity will oversee. But what this will allow us to do is send this out to our grantees, hopefully by the end of the month, so they know what to keep track of moving forward. But what we've asked them to do, Elizabeth, if you can scroll down, please, is input their MRC budget. So the grant budget they submitted to us, and we've called out in the instructions that they should make sure they use the grant budget that was included in their contract. There was some changes, and again, if the funding was reduced, we want to make sure this is accurate. So we'll ask them to input that data at one time, and then also each quarter we'll have them tell us what the spending was for each of those line items. We've also included funding sources outside of the MRC so that we can get a bigger picture and a more thorough picture of these projects and how they're being supported. What we'll do is for the second reporting period and ongoing reporting periods is have a year-to-date column, so that we'll be asking them to report on just the expenses during the reporting period, but we'll be able to track again the sort of year-to-date costs. We've also included a column at the end for notes, so if there is any disparity between what they had budgeted and what was actually spent, they can provide some clarification on that. Again, that will be really helpful for us and for a future vendor to be able to understand what may require further discussion, or what is just expected variation between budget and actuals.
Looks great. I appreciate all the work. And Pat, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, one quick question. If I remember state contracts way back when you were over or under a budget by a certain percentage, you really were asked to explain why. So will there be an explanation that if they spent in their first quarter the whole amount of money, will there be a way to say why? Or if they didn't spend anything, why? Or again, way far off on a budget, one way or the other? Is there like a guideline that you're suggesting to them, like if they're 10 or 20% above or below the budgeted amount, can you please explain?
So our contracts right now do require explanation and discussion with the MRC if there is $1,000 or greater budget variation. That is something that I will say I do recommend we change moving forward to be a percentage of the total funds, especially for our larger contracts. There will be budget variations of over 1,000, and that's to be expected. So what we'll be able to do here, Pat, is look at their expenses, have them give us a quick summary of why there was variation, and then staff will follow up and request further explanation if that's necessary. I would also recommend that when we do send this out to actually collect the data, that we include a larger sort of long form response, so that in addition to this notes column, they would be able to provide further explanation about any changes. And as you mentioned, if there wasn't any spending, they could tell us the reason why through that.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks for sharing that. Is this going out to providers soon?
Ideally by the end of the month, yes. We'll ask them to complete the financial report, at least just the budget section. And then the performance reports, we have a couple requests for them, so they can identify their own performance measures. And then again, we'll ask them to send that back to us. And then in a few months, when we're actually ready to collect those reports, we will figure out a way to get that information, but we want to ensure that they know what we'll ask, and they should have that information sooner rather than later.
Great. It's a crucial piece of just understanding what's going on and oversight. So thanks for working on that. It looks like it's in great shape. So if there's nothing else on that topic, I did want to just quickly ask, are we amending the Barry Dunn contract to provide more support in the interim before we have that RFP out and awarded?
Yes, we got their RFP. I think it's with the OAG for processing. We were able to move that forward. We extended the time frame which they would be working for us. We didn't have to increase the total contract value, but we did add services that are sort of a shortened version of what you saw in that RFP. It doesn't include evaluation, but it does include data collection and monitoring.
Awesome, great. And I think that's all the agenda items I had. This is my last meeting. I'm leaving state service at the end of the month. After almost 6 years, and my tenure on the council will be coming to an end. I apologize. I wish I was at the council meeting in person. I think it was the first one I missed in person. But I'm sure our paths will cross in the future, but I know I think I'll be working, I have about a week left, and I'll be working with Gordon and doing what I can before I leave to talk about replacement for my position. But I think Gordon will be instrumental on that, even though he's not on the council anymore. He's a good conduit to figure out who will be the second governor's appointee to the Maine Recovery Council. Mary asked if I had any advice for the council. I will leave you with capacity. I think we've worked, startups in public are hard, and I think just continuing to work on making sure that we have the capacity to push things out. I've always liked to say that I don't do policy, I just do operations. It's the how stuff gets done, not the what gets done. And sometimes that's harder, especially in the public sector. So just don't forget about the how. And it's not only the what, even though the what is obviously the substance of what we're and why we're all here. But that's as much as I'm gonna say, unless I'm happy to answer any questions or if there's any other comments before we conclude the meeting.
I will miss your wisdom.
Thank you for your state service, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. And also, I can say with confidence, we would not be where we are without your experience and skills and the support you've been able to bring to the council. So thank you for that. Big shoes to fill, for sure.
Yes, thank you, Ben. I ran into Gordon in the hallways of the State House yesterday. I understand there's some big travel plans in your future. I wish you all the best with that. Enjoy.
Thank you. Yep. It's been a good experience. Sometimes this job has felt this council has felt like a second job a little bit, but it is important work, and I appreciate getting all of you and working with you, and you're all in good hands here. So
and don't forget, Ben, we're always on the Zoom. You're welcome.
I know. You guys are easier to find than anyone else I'm leaving here at DHHS, I think. You do all of our work in public here. But thank you. It's been a great experience. Is there, not excluding anything related to me, is there any other topics that people wanted to cover before we conclude the meeting? Very good. Well, take care, and we will see you all at the next council meeting next month. Thanks.
Bye, Ben, and thank you. Bye, everyone.